Well, hey everybody, welcome to Network Maintenance Live. I am Dustin Raybrick, host of the Sysadmin Show, and this is a YouTube series that I host. I try to host it every week, although I don't always get to it. And I want to talk about network maintenance that I do. I do it here on Tuesday nights, and these are short videos covering IT best practices around and tips and tricks for updating your IT infrastructure. Well, tonight I want to talk about what to do when things go wrong. Because when we do network maintenance, it does not always go as planned. And anybody who may be watching the stream live or after the fact, if you want to leave comments, I will be happy to answer them as best I can after, either as we go here or after the show. So let's talk about this. When something goes wrong, you're either partway through or kind of towards the end of your network maintenance window, and it's not going the way that you expected. What do you do? Well, first of all, communication is key. You've got to reach out to those people who are, you know, above you in the chain of command. Your direct manager, the manager of the site that you're working for, or the team that you're on, or the management of the company, and let them know the status where you are right now, because you don't want to try to hide anything. The more that you try to cover up the fact that something is not going right, the worse it's going to be when the truth comes out, and the truth will come out. There's really no point in going this alone. None of us need to be heroes here and try to do this on our own. We need to be a team and let people know how things are going, whether it's good or whether it's bad. And definitely do not wait too long to report the fact that it's not going to schedule. So the sooner that you realize it and kind of admit it to yourself. I mean, none of us want to really, get to the point where we realize that it's not working out, that we can't do it. But sometimes it's just the sooner that you can realize that and admit it to yourself, the sooner that you can start to take steps to let other people know and take steps to start getting back up and running, whatever that looks like. So let's talk about this for a minute. First of all, let's be prepared. I did a quick search here and came across these Amazon articles on what's called a runbook. And a runbook is basically a plan for going ahead with typical operations. So if you have, let's say, Windows updates that you do on servers on a regular basis, right? What is your runbook? What is your typical process for executing these updates, right? You download them, you make sure that there's none that look like they may be dangerous, and you install them, then you reboot, then you check logs, and you check services, right? That kind of stuff, right? That'd be your runbook, right? So this is the steps that you should follow to carry out a typical procedure in the order in which you should follow them. Because this is nice when people change positions or you want to cross train, or if something was to happen to you, kind of an information dump about how to run, or if there's something that you do only quarterly, like certificates, right? You're only renewing certificates hopefully every 3 years, because it's just not something you want to do very often, and that's the longest cert you can get for certificates typically is about 3 years. So what do you do what's the process to renew them? Man, I can tell you, when I go to do certificates, I have to remember how to do that every single time. So I've written a run book on how to do that and what servers and where on those servers and which certificates are wildcards and not, so that I can remind myself later on. So that's a run book. The other thing you want to get going is a playbook. A playbook is what to do, what actions to take when things go wrong. And this is great because when things do start to go wrong, you're not going to be necessarily thinking clearly because you're a little bit stressed out and a little bit overwhelmed and the fact that things didn't go the way that you wanted. So having a playbook can put you at ease, knowing that you're taking the steps that you, along with management, decided are the appropriate steps to take in the event of something going wrong. And I have one of these, and it's actually posted up on my wall in my office, and it basically says if the network goes down, what do I test and how do I test, right? And what are the steps and how many sites are down, right? That kind of stuff. And how long do I do some basic testing before I report it, and how long do I let it go before I then recommend some sort of a failover to another site or disaster recovery, that kind of stuff. So that's a playbook. And having these things, at least a sketch, right? Even if you can't go through and fill in all the details, having something is better than nothing. So having these in place for the kind of procedures and events that you may see happening are really going to save you a lot of trouble when an event occurs. All right, going from there, now we want to try not to make the issue worse. And ways that you can do that is making too many changes at once. And this is just a best practice overall. When you're doing maintenance, don't stack maintenance on top of each other with a system. So don't do firmware updates at the same time as window updates, because when something goes wrong, how do you know if it was the firmware or the software that had the problem? It's hard to know. So if you have a chance, right, and you have multiple systems, let's say you have multiple terminal servers, don't do updates on all the terminal servers at the same time, because if one of them goes down because of an update, it's most likely they all will. So only change one at a time, then you have the other ones to fall back on if needed. So try to limit the scope of your changes so that if you do have a problem, it's pretty obvious what caused that problem and you can undo it. Next is don't make any unplanned changes. And this is really tempting, right? It's really tempting when we want to go ahead and have a maintenance window, but we didn't test something ahead of time, and we didn't really plan on changing it, but it's sitting right there and it's really easy and close and possible to make that change. It's really tempting, but don't do it. Wait and properly test ahead of time. Make sure that you're only making changes that are within the scope, the plan that you had outlined ahead of time. And then making changes that you don't understand. I know that we want to constantly push ourselves and stretch our abilities and find out more and more of what we can do and get into cooler technology. But there's a time and a place for that. So go to the lab, learn in the lab, and what you understand from that, and training and software and books and that kind of stuff. Once you understand a concept and you've done it a few times in a development environment, then go ahead and do it in production. Don't treat production as a development environment. You will regret it if you do. All right, fail back before you're exhausted. Now, it could be typically late at night or early in the morning when you're doing this work, and it's important to kind of identify it, again, as early as possible, because sometimes the failback procedures could take hours and you're already tired. So the sooner that you can decide, okay, we need to restore this VM because the updates crashed it, or we need to fail over to disaster recovery because production has been damaged in some way, whatever it is. Do that as soon as possible, because the fresher you are when you make that decision, make sure you're leaving a little bit of margin so that you're not completely exhausted trying to fix the issue and solve the problem, and then you have no energy and kind of mental alertness left to fail back or fail over. That's important, because the more tired you are, the more mistakes you're going to make, and that's just going to cause more issues down the line. And then escalate when needed. I mean, we all have to admit when we've outreached our abilities and kind of hit, as far as we can go with our own research. And sometimes just, even though we may be able to figure it out, sometimes just that second opinion or another viewpoint can really help us get across the finish line. So internally, if you've got a level 3, 4, or 5 escalation option internally to take another look at the issue, go ahead and do that within a reasonable amount of time. If you've got product support, so if the product that you're working on, let's say that you're working on Exchange, do you have a vendor, right, that you can look to? Can you call Microsoft and open up a support ticket with them and escalate it that way, right? Do you have some sort of mechanism to get support there, or an MSP, right, or consultant? Do you have a relationship already with a vendor that you can leverage and call them up, whatever time it may be, and say, hey, I know it's after hours, but I've got my email servers down. Can you help me? I was running these updates and this is what happened. And there you are. So having these vendor relationships in place, even if you're not going to use them consistently, if you're trying to do a lot of that in-house, having them in place ahead of time and maybe having a block of hours with them is really critical for those times when you need them. And maybe you don't need them maybe once a year, but having them in place ahead of time and kind of maintaining some of those relationships just so that when you need them, they will pick up the phone is really useful. So that's a little bit about what I have to say for network maintenance and what happens when it goes wrong. So I'd love to hear any stories that you guys have about network maintenance that maybe went wrong and how you dealt with it and kind of what the outcome of that was. Go ahead and leave them here in the comments. You can email me, Dustin at sysadminshow.com. And until next time, I encourage you to never stop learning.